World inflation rate for 2021 was 3.42%, a 1.5% increase from 2020. World inflation rate for 2020 was 1.92%, a 0.27% decline from 2019. World inflation rate for 2019 was 2.19%, a 0.25% decline from 2018. Global consumer price inflation will likely ease to an average of 5% in 2023, finishing the year at a 3.5% year-on-year pace. So, how did we get here? Hi there. I'm sure many of you have heard the term inflation during casual conversations, but the question is how many of you actually know what it really is. In a market economy, prices for goods and services can always change. Some prices rise, some prices fall. Inflation occurs when there is a broad increase in the prices of goods and services, not just of individual items. It means you can buy less for $1 today than you could yesterday. In other words, inflation reduces the value of the currency over time. It can also be defined as a measurement tool used to determine how much more expensive a set of goods and services has become over a certain period, usually a year. It may be one of the most famous words in economics. Unlike a lot of other abstract economic processes, it has a real, tangible impact on the way that we live our lives. Sustained inflation has been caused by a combination of increased consumer demand thanks to low interest rates and high levels of government spending, supply chain troubles, and good old-fashioned profit maximization from companies who have been able to raise their prices under the guise of keeping up with inflation that they are directly causing by raising their prices. But before we continue, hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the bell icon and leave a comment down below, and we will do our best to respond to you. Understanding the ways that inflation can get back to a healthy level can teach us a lot about how to properly manage an economy, also how to invest more wisely, and what can go wrong. But like every other thing, it didn't just appear. It has a story, a history. So, where it all started, historically, when commodity money was used, periods of inflation and deflation would alternate depending on the condition of the economy. However, when large prolonged infusions of gold or silver into an economy occurred, this could lead to long periods of inflation. The adoption of fiat currency by many countries from the 18th century onwards made much larger variations in the supply of money possible. Rapid increases in the money supply have taken place a number of times in countries experiencing political crises, producing hyperinflations, episodes of extreme inflation rates much higher than those observed in earlier periods of commodity money. The hyperinflation in Germany is a notable example. Also, the hyperinflation in Venezuela is the highest in the world, with an annual inflation rate of 833,997% as of October 2018. In the past, inflations of varying magnitudes have occurred from the price revolution of the 16th century, which was driven by the flood of gold and particularly silver seized and mined by the Spaniards in Latin America, to the largest paper money inflation of all time in Hungary after World War II. However, since the 1980s, inflation has been held low and stable in countries with independent central banks. This has led to a moderation of the business cycle and a reduction in variation in most macroeconomic indicators, an event known as the Great Moderation. Rapid increases in the quantity of money or in the overall money supply have occurred in many different societies throughout history, changing with different forms of money used. For instance, when silver was used as currency, a government could collect silver coins, melt them down, mix them with other metals such as copper or lead, and reissue them at the same nominal value, a process known as debasement. At the ascent of Nero as Roman emperor in AD 54, the denarius contained more than 90% silver, but by the 270s hardly any silver was left. By diluting the silver with other metals, the government could issue more coins without increasing the amount of silver used to make them. When the cost of each coin is lowered in this way, the government profits from an increase in seigniorage. This practice would increase the money supply, but at the same time the relative value of each coin would be lowered. As the relative value of the coins becomes lower, consumers would need to give more coins in exchange for the same goods and services as before. These goods and services would experience a price increase as the value of each coin is reduced. The Song dynasty introduced the practice of printing paper money to create fiat currency. During the Mongol Yuan dynasty, the government spent a great deal of money fighting costly wars and reacted by printing more money, leading to inflation. Fearing the inflation that plagued the Yuan dynasty, the Ming dynasty initially rejected the use of paper money and reverted to using copper coins. During the Malian king Mansa Musa's Hajj to Mecca in 1324, he was reportedly accompanied by a camel train that included thousands of people and nearly 100 camels. When he passed through Cairo, he spent or gave away so much gold that it depressed its price in Egypt for over a decade, reducing its purchasing power. From the second half of the 15th century to the first half of the 17th, Western Europe experienced a major inflationary cycle referred to as the price revolution, with prices on average rising perhaps sixfold over 150 years. This is often attributed to the influx of gold and silver from the New World into Habsburg Spain, with wider availability of silver in previously cash-starved Europe causing widespread inflation. European population rebound from the Black Death began before the arrival of New World metal and may have begun a process of inflation that New World silver compounded later in the 16th century. That being said, you could conclude that the economy is where it is now because, in the past, important people made more or less wise decisions. Some sort of butterfly effect. Leave a comment below with your opinion about the history of the inflation and what can you learn from it. Because as we know, the history tends to repeat. Getting closer to the present, I'm going to introduce you to a defining macroeconomic period of the 20th century, the Great Inflation. It lasted from 1965 to 1982, and it led economists to rethink the policies of the Fed and other central banks. Over the nearly 2 decades it lasted, the global monetary system established during World War II was abandoned. There were 4 economic recessions, 2 severe energy shortages, and the unprecedented peacetime implementation of wage and price controls. But that failure also brought a transformative change in macroeconomic theory and ultimately the rules that today guide the monetary policies of the Federal Reserve and other central banks around the world. If the Great Inflation was a consequence of a great failure of American macroeconomic policy, its conquest should be counted as a triumph. In 1964, inflation measured a little more than 1% per year. It had been in this vicinity over the preceding 6 years. Inflation began ratcheting upward in the mid-1960s, and reached more than 14% in 1980. It eventually declined to average only 3.5% in the latter half of the 1980s. While economists debate the relative importance of the factors that motivated and perpetuated inflation for more than a decade, there is little debate about its source. The origins of the Great Inflation were policies that allowed for an excessive growth in the supply of money, Federal Reserve policies. World inflation rate for 2021 was 3.42%, a 1.5% increase from 2020. World inflation rate for 2020 was 1.92%, a 0.27% decline from 2019. World inflation rate for 2019 was 2.19%, a 0.25% decline from 2018. Global consumer price inflation will likely ease to an average of 5% in 2023, finishing the year at a 3.5% year-on-year pace. So, now how can you use this information to make some wise investments? The fact the Federal Reserve is trying to lower the inflation rate will lead to major opportunities in the following months. This means all the assets will be on sale. Most of them are 60% cheaper right now than a year ago. So, if you want to know what the biggest investors will do, go and watch this video here. Also, hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the bell icon to get new video updates, and leave a comment down below with your questions and thoughts, and we will try to give you the best response. See you there.